If you've heard mention of Georgia lately, chances are the next word in that sentence was runoff.
Georgia's two Senate runoffs.
The high-stakes Georgia Senate runoff.
All eyes are on Georgia, where two runoff races will determine the balance of power in the U.S. Senate.
For more than 50 years, Georgia has used runoff elections to decide races from members of the state legislature to who sits in the governor's mansion. But do people really know why the runoff system was established in the first place?
I'm not sure, really where it comes from.
No idea.
We have to determine who the actual winner is, with a clear majority.
But some experts say that wasn't the original intent of the law.
After the Civil War, blacks were a major part of the Southern electorate. Once Reconstruction and military occupation of the South ended, white Southerners spent the rest of the 19th century squeezing blacks out of the electorate.
White Southerners developed a county unit system to give less populated, but primarily white, rural parts of the state more political power, meanwhile disenfranchising black voters. In 1962, the Supreme Court said the system violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
At that point, many Southern states, including Georgia, looked for other devices, and the runoff system was one of those devices.
Enter Denmark Groover. Groover, a member of Georgia's House of Representatives, fell out of power, and he blamed, quote, Negro bloc voting for his loss, according to a report by the U.S. Department of the Interior. A vocal segregationist, Groover was determined to stop black Georgians' growing political power. Quote, if you want to establish if I was racially prejudiced, I was. If you want to establish that some of my political activity was racially motivated, it was, Groover would say in a deposition years later. In 1963, 1 year after the Supreme Court struck down the county unit system, Groover, now back in office, proposed a new election system, the runoff.
Groover explicitly talked about how even if the white vote were divided in the first election and a black made the runoff, whites could come together as a majority to win in the runoff. In
1964, the runoff system became law in Georgia.
No blacks have been elected to the senior offices in Georgia, meaning governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, ever. So apparently it worked.
Former Georgia Public Service Commissioner David Burgess is the first and until this year only black candidate to face a statewide runoff in Georgia.
It was strenuous trying to retool and re-energize and get out and encourage people to go back to the polls and vote again.
In 2006, Burgess beat his opponents by more than 50,000 votes in the general election. But because no candidate received more than 50% of the vote share, the top two were forced into a runoff.
A lot of people ask me, say, David, you won. You won by some 50-something thousand votes. Why are you getting a re-election for the same position? They were confused by it all. People just didn't have an interest in it.
Burgess ultimately lost the runoff by around 9,000 votes in a contest with about a tenth of the voter turnout.
At the end of the day, in my mind, did that really reflect the will of the people, or was it a result of some political misaligned process? So I didn't think it was a fair process, but, those were the rules of the game.
In 1990, years before Burgess's election, the Department of Justice sued to overturn Georgia's runoff system. John Dunn, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, said the system had a, quote, demonstrably chilling effect on the ability of blacks to become candidates for public office, calling the majority vote rule a, quote, electoral steroid for white candidates. But the court didn't see it that way.
What the federal court said is that the Justice Department failed to offer sufficient proof, and so they allowed runoffs to continue. Not
all runoff systems are rooted in racism. Maine, for example, has a very small black population, but it uses a ranked choice system that's effectively an instant runoff if no candidate reaches 50%. But if you look at the 7 states that hold traditional runoff elections, if nobody gets a majority, all of those states are in the South. As for Georgia, in a year marked by widespread protests and demands for racial and social justice, the state's runoff system remains a glaring reminder of the systemic racism ingrained in the fabric of America, lingering in one of the values we hold most dear, democracy.
Do you think it's worthwhile for Georgia to rethink its runoff system?
I do. I really do think they need to rethink the process and come up with a fair process that ultimately reflects the will of the people.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.